So our game plan here is we're going to talk about Cloud SIM. Now, just to kind of bring this 3-day event here to some semblance of close, let me just take a second here and stop the slides for just a second. Let me take a peek at Sumo. So Tuesday, we talked a little bit about overview of Sumo. From a, we've got collectors, we've got sources, we bring the data in, we can create little queries, all that sort of thing. If you want to know more about creating queries, we have a search mastery certification class that focuses on query writing and stuff like that. If you're focused on metrics, we have a metric mastery class, again, focuses on metrics. We've got a Kubernetes class and then that sort of thing. And of course, we've got an administration class. But then yesterday we talked about observability, and in observability, we talked more about some of these new functionality and features, traces, the Explorer, the root cause Explorer, service maps, all kinds of neat little functionality that we've been adding to the tool over the last year. So that's that. And today we're going to talk about Cloud SIM. Again, SIM being an acronym for Security Information and Event Management. Okay. We also refer to the Cloud SIM product sometimes as CSE, Cloud SIM Enterprise. Okay. So you'll see it referred to a lot of different ways. But if I go into my Sumo logic, and if you have purchased Cloud SIM, you will see it on your main menu here, assuming you have privileges to it. And I'll mention briefly that the privileges are actually controlled through this Sumo core product. So you decide what privileges you want folks to have to your Cloud SIM environment, but basically they get to go into this environment. And we're going to talk about this today. So this is going to be our focus, the Cloud SIM Enterprise product. And I think you're going to be, I think you're going to be quite pleased with it. And again, if you've used it, you've got things to share, please feel free to let us know. Please be an active participant in this. But I am going to stop the streaming video for a second, and I am going to get back to the slides, and let's kick this little rascal off. So our agenda today, as my slide loads here, so we're going to talk about how the data gets into Cloud SIM. And then we'll take a look. We're going to log into the Cloud SIM, and we're going to walk through the user interface. Then we're going to go through a series of exercises, lab 2 and 3, where we're going to talk about some threat investigations for Cloud SIM. We're going to look at some insights, and I'll talk about what an insight is and all that stuff, and see basically what kind of information Cloud SIM is trying to help us. Then we'll talk about a little customization and tuning of Cloud SIM, how we can create rule tuning, custom rules, and custom insights in here as well. So the lecture and lab portion of this should take about 2 hours or less. And then we'll get a chance to take the certification exam for you. And basically that's that. So one thing I do want to take the opportunity though, before we eventually close this thing up in a couple of hours, and that is if there's any questions or anything we can do to help you, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or your team out there in EMEA. But also if you've got ideas, suggestions, thoughts, other classes that you guys are interested in, feel free to let us know, and we can gladly schedule those up in the next quarterly search jam that we schedule up. So we really do try to put the customer voice first and foremost. So if you've got preferences, we'd love to hear them. If you got feedback, suggestions, ideas, again, we'd love to hear them. So please let us know. I am going to make one more pass here at my participants list to make sure you guys all have your microphones enabled. I see some folks have joined here. We're going to enable your microphones. So bear with me a second when we do that. And let's go ahead and get this party started. Again, I do remind you that if you do take the certification exam after the class and you send it, you pass it, then you're welcome to send us an email to training-promotions@sumologic.com with a copy of your certificate. And we will send you an Uber Eats voucher. Now, one thing I should mention to you, I don't know if any of you are located in India, realizing this is an EMEA class, but the time zones are somewhere close, about as close as they are to the US here. But if you are located in India, we also have a relationship with Ziggy. So they also, it's kind of an Uber Eats equivalent type thing. And so we can do that. You just need to send, again, the email to training-promotions@sumologic.com. Just specify that you're in India. One thing I would mention to you, to be fair and provide complete disclosure, we certainly have a contract with Uber Eats. We're doing vouchers left, right, and center, no problem. Our relationship with Ziggy is a little new, and I'm not sure we have got the account fully set up yet. So it may take a couple of extra days before you get your voucher if you're in India. So there you go. Do you get a certification for every certification we pass? Okay. Again, the intent here is that when you take the class, we want you to take the certification right away. Okay. Certainly, we're providing you value by providing you the information and knowledge. But for us, where we find we really get value is when people get certified, then they play with the product more. So for us, we want you to get certified as quickly as possible. So the goal here is to get certified in the same day that the class is offered. So that's the kicker. Okay. So we want you to try to do it in the same day the class is offered. If you do it the next day or the day after, we may not pay off on the Uber Eats voucher. We want you to get it done today. Okay. So thanks a lot for asking that. And then also somebody's asking here, can I provide presentation and lab details? I certainly will. So just bear with me a second. In fact, I'll do that real quick. Let's just go ahead and stop the slides. And bear with me a second. Again, we want to go out to the community at sumologic.com. The community at sumologic.com, the URL is support.sumologic.com. That's how we get there. Support.sumologic.com. Then we click on community. Then we search for the word slides. By the way, we are going to put our slides, our recordings, and our PowerPoint into our learning management system. So that is something that we're going to do over the next quarter, I hope. And I say I hope because we've talked to the certification manager and some folks about it in here. I'm just not sure when it's actually on the schedule. But the point is you'll be able to get the stuff through our LMS, because as some of you have pointed out, when I click on this link, and actually I'll copy this link and put it in the chat box so you guys have it. But when you and I tried to download some of these, I did not realize that Slideshow has apparently changed their rules. But here's Cloud Sim Fundamentals. This is the class we're in right now. But when you try to download the slides, it's asking you for now some sort of a, log in with Facebook, sign in with, Google, or sign up with your email. That's not our intent. Our intent is to make this easy and available to you. So we will be moving these to our LMS where you take your certifications. Okay. So that should hopefully make it much easier. So this is where you can get a hold of the slides. This is where you can get a hold of a recording for this class. And of course, this is also where you can get the labs. And the lab guide for this one is another one of those PDFs, which I'm going to upload. In fact, I'll upload it right now just to make it easy for everybody. You know what I just realized? I shared that link with host and participants. I didn't share that link with everyone. Sorry about that. Fix that now. And let me also go out here and upload. Here is our PDF document that we're going to be using for this class. So, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. All right, we'll get into the environment, we'll play around, we'll look around, that sort of thing. So hopefully that answers all the questions that are currently being asked. And again, hopefully we can do it. We can, all's good. All right. So let us get into the training material here. And in our training material, we want to talk about how does the data get into our Cloud Sim. Our data gets into our Cloud Sim just like it does in Sumo. It goes through our collectors and our sources. There's a little checkbox in the source that you check to forward it onto the Cloud Sim. So our Cloud Sim, Solution Information Event Management System, is our security-based system. It is an enterprise-grade platform that helps you understand and see what's going on with your security and operational issues. The focus here is, like I said, security. Now, Somebody yesterday asked a question about SOAR. SOAR, which is, I can't remember if it's a security or whatever system, orchestration and automated response. We have a Cloud SOAR product that integrates with our Cloud SIM product so that you can automate some of these actions in our Cloud SIM product. And eventually we'll bring the SOAR product into automating more of Sumo logic as a whole. But we had to start someplace, and we started with the Cloud SIM product. So, but the point is like I said, that's still fairly new. We haven't built out the training material for that. So just to pull up that conversation here and make sure things are set up. Manic asked a question here. SOAR is on-prem by Sumo, right? SOAR is the Cloud SOAR is on the cloud. So it's on-prem in the sense of it's part of the Sumo environment, if that's what you're asking. Okay. So I'm just trying to be clear here. All right. There is, by the way, a portion of our SOAR product that can be installed on-prem, but I'm going to leave that to my wonderful sales engineers to take up with you if you've got questions. All right. So let's talk about data and how the data comes in. Again, we use the same collectors, the same sources. The only difference is we have a little checkbox in there that we check that says, hey, forward this to the Cloud SIM product. So you'll find this is the process that we go through, right? We take your log messages, we take your logs, goes through our normal collection process, it goes through our normal ingestion process for our sources, and that generates something which we call a message, pure and simple. Now we take that message and we're going to parse out the fields, right? We know what a CloudTrail log looks like. We know what a CloudWatch log looks like. We know what various other logs look like, and we can parse out the various fields. So, and we can identify when we set up a source, we can say, okay, this field represents the source IP address, this field represents that, and then we can also map them. So in the parsing, mapping, and enrichment section, we're going to parse out the fields from those logs, map those fields to the appropriate metadata tags that we're going to use, and then we're also going to enrich it. We're going to do things like go out and look at crowdsource and see, is this a known threat? Is this IP address a known threat? We're going to enrich and look up, maybe doing a reverse DNS lookup on the IP address to get the host name. So we're going to sit there and do that sort of enrichment as part of our process. And when we do that, we now refer to these as records. So let me kind of catch my slides up here where we're at. So again, the parsing and mapping, the enrichment generates our records. Now we're going to take these records and we're going to compare them to a bunch of rules that we have built into the product. And if we find that there's a record that matches a rule, we are then going to extract out the entity. Who is this? We're going to extract out the IP address. We're going to extract out the host name. We're going to extract out the username, something that kind of identifies the who. And we call that a signal. And that's a signal of something we want to keep track of. That's a signal that we want to sit there and see what's going on. Now, I should mention to you about these rules. These rules are from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So we have adopted the MITRE ATT&CK framework as our threat Bible, if you will. And so we use the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the built-in rules that are there. And these rules, like I said, are already built into the product, and you can create your own rules and as well as your own rule tuning. I'll talk about that later to catch things that are specific to you or your organization or some of the applications that you run. But with these signals, what we're going to do is we're going to look for correlation. So we're going to look over a 2-week period of time. Each one of these signals is given a score. And so we're going to gather these signals by the entity, by either the host name, the IP address, the user ID, something along those lines. We're going to look within a 2-week period of time. And if the score on the individual signals is greater than or equal to 12 over that 2-week period of time, we're going to call it an insight. We're going to generate an insight saying, hey, you guys need to look into this. Now, if you think about it, you've got lots and lots of log records. We've talked about this Tuesday and yesterday, and also we've got tons and tons of log information. The ability to take all of that log information in here and synthesize it down and generate these insights is very powerful, because you don't have to worry about it. It's going to do it for you. It's going to help you out quite a bit, and therefore make it easy for you to find that actionable security investigations. It's going to give you a chance to focus, you and your SOC team, your security operations center, the ability to focus on what's important to your environment. So as I mentioned before, we've got a standard Sumo Logic collection, whether we're dealing data from our Sumo Logic Coffee app or CloudTrail logs or whatever the logs are, we go through this normal collection ingestion process. Then we take those messages, and as I said before, we're going to parse them out, parse out the individual fields and stuff, the various nuggets of data that we want, as well as mapping those fields. By the way, we teach the parsing and mapping process. If you need to do any custom parsing and mapping, we show you how to do that in the Cloud SIEM admin class. So that's where we really focus more on the sources and kind of driving this home. This is designed to be a level 1 class. The admin class is designed to be a little bit more advanced. And then, as I said, we enrich it by going to things like CrowdStrike and other things, do a reverse DNS lookup. All right. Okay, thanks, Taffy. So again, we talk about enrichment. Say, here's our message. It says SSO equals an IP-127-0-0.1. Well, we recognize that as an IP address, but we're going to translate it. So we're going to parse that field out. We're going to translate it into a real IP address. And in the mapping, we're going to assign it to the metadata tag associated with that, which we happen to call source device _ IP. Okay. And then we can also go through this username and timestamp and all that stuff. And like I said, we'll parse those fields out. Like I said, in the enrichment process, we'll send it to CrowdStrike, and we'll make sure that see what the threat level on that IP address is, that known IP address. Okay. Okay. And somebody's asking a question there, Taffy, in the chat box. So then that generates these records. And these records don't necessarily indicate a threat yet, but now we're going to compare them against our rules within the product. And if we find one that matches the rules, we're going to extract out the entity of that record, and we're going to generate a signal. And then from that signal, we're going to take and we're going to correlate that signal. So again, these records are defined based on, the rules are defined based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And these rules each have a severity score that they're assigned. So you'll find that when you and I create rules later today, we'll talk about how we give it a severity score. And so if the severity score of these rules added up, because again, you've got multiple signals when we do our correlation, we've got multiple signals. And if each of the scores, the total of the scores add up to greater than 12 or greater, we consider that to be an insight within a 2-week period of time. Okay. All right. So as I said, if the rules triggers, the entity is extracted and a signal is created. And again, we gather everything by entity. So, we can see by entity, by an IP address, by a host name, by a username, what sort of activity we're seeing. And I'll show you that in just a few minutes. And then, as I said, we take those signals and we correlate them. So over a 2-week period of time, based on the who, the IP address, the host name, whatever, we look and see what their scores are. And if the scores, like I said, some of the scores is greater than 12 over a period of time, 2-week period of time, we generate an insight. Okay. And so that's basically how this works. In a few minutes, we're going to log in and look at the Cloud SIEM environment, but this is the all-knowing, all-seeing eye, if you will. For those of you who are familiar with World of Warcraft, this interface may look a little familiar. You may have seen it before. And that's because the designers who wrote World of Warcraft were the designers who built this heads-up display. So in this heads-up display, what we have here, these circles represent a time range. And I'll show you in a minute where that time range can be set. But here on the outside, I have all of my records. So those are my records. And then these columns, these lighter blue columns, those are my signals. And then these red triangles are my insights. So again, as part of our ingestion of the data and the process it goes through, these insights get generated automatically. And that's a good starting point to our investigation. All right. I think we've got everything taken care of. All right. Best, did you just raise your hand, sir? Is there a question?
Yeah, sorry. I thought it might be just easier to say instead of writing it. So basically, so the insight is are based on rules you set up, right? So so if you set up the wrong rules or something like that, so you won't get through insights. Is that right? Is that accurate?
You're absolutely correct. If you set up bad rules, you will get bad insights. Now, one thing that we recommend that you do, and we'll talk about that when we create a rule, is we'll mark that rule as a prototype, which will prevent it from generating any insights while you test it out. So when you develop a new rule yourself, now keep in mind that because we're using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we got a bunch of built-in rules that have been tried and tested and true, and they work great. Okay, so we provide rules for you. But as you pointed out in your question, somebody could create a rule, and it could be a not well thought out rule, which could, if they don't mark it as a prototype, could generate a lot of false insights. So you're absolutely right. Just like any other tool, you can use it correctly, you can use it incorrectly. Okay. So, and then somebody says like in analysis mode. I'm not sure what you mean by like in analysis mode. So I need to, all right. So what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and log into our Sumo Logic environment. And you guys have done this before. You've done this over the last 2 days. So once again, let me go out here and I see. Okay. The question is when you create a rule, you put it in analysis mode first. I'm not sure I'd call it analysis mode. I'd mark it as a prototype. Let me get into that. Like I said, give me a little bit to explain and qualify and all that stuff. So again, what I want you to do now is I want you to fire up your web browser, Google Chrome or Firefox, and I'd like you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. And then I want you to pick that 3-digit number. You can use the same 3-digit number you used yesterday, okay, or the day before. I don't particularly care. So, but you want to pick a 3-digit number. And so you're going to log in as training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then you are going to type in as the password, New Year 22 exclamation mark. So I want to make sure you guys all get a chance to log in. If you would, when you get logged in, please go ahead and raise your hand. That way I know you're all logged in. And because we're going to cover this in a kind of a real and interactive way, rather than me trying to do some sort of a bad harbor tour. So we're going to play with it, to kick the tires and play with it. And it looks like about 8 of you have logged in. Again, if you're having problems logging in, let us know. Put us in the chat box, unmute your mic, ask for help, anything we can do to help you. Also, want to remind you, earlier I put up a document in the chat box. This is that document. And the first part of that document is you're going to log into the training environment. Okay. Now, when you log into the training environment, and you are here in the Sumo Logic environment, and by the way, if you don't see this navigation panel, as we know from previous days, you can click up here, opens up our navigation panel. And for this course, I want you to click Cloud Sim Enterprise. Click on Cloud Sim Enterprise, and here you will, we will go into the Cloud Sim environment. And this is what we're going to focus on. Okay. Now, again, if anybody's having problems logging in, please let us know. But I'm going to go ahead and lower everybody's hands. And I'm going to assume that those of you who want to be logged in are logged in. and we will discuss this interface. So I'm going to start over here on the left panel. And in the left panel, it says that our Cloud Sim environment is online. Our time range here is currently set for 24 hours. I can change that. So whenever my time range is set, all my values that I see across here, for the most part, reflect that range. So in the last 24 hours, I have ingested 26,000 records. That's up 5% from the previous 24 hours. I've created 666 signals. That's down a little bit. And I have generated 3 insights over the last 24 hours. Additionally, as far as my insight metrics, I can see and get a sense for things I've detected, things I've responded to, things I've remediated. And we'll talk about how we respond and remediate in just a little bit. Here I can see my insights by status. Currently, there are 3 insights over the last 24 hours, and none of them have been in progress, moved, or anything like that. They will in just a few minutes. We can play with that. Down here, I can see across on my x-axis, which is time, I can see when my insights appeared. So that's basically that information. Now, in here in the middle is my all-seeing eye, radar, heads-up display, whatever you want to call it. And as I said, when I'm looking around this circle, I'm looking around, in this case, a 24-hour period of time. If I change the range to, say, 12 hours, now I'm looking across a 12-hour range across this circle. So whatever your range is set for, that's basically what you're looking at here. The outer ring here are my records. These are the number of records that we've ingested. Those records can turn into signals, which we see signals here. And then those signals, of course, turn into insights, which are these red triangles. So I can see when my insights are appearing. And I can click on one of these insights if I want to, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Over here on the far right, this is my latest insight. This shows me my insight. All our insights are given a number. We tag it. And then what type of insight based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We can also see who the entity is. In this case, it's a user known as Rico Dynamite. Over here, I can see that this particular insight consists of 4 signals over a period of 10 days. So again, this is over my 2-week period of time. The severity of the overall insight is high. And then across here is my time, my 10 days. And then my x-axis is the level of severity based on my score. So I can see there's a little symbol down here. So this was a fairly low score. Up here, there's one above on the x-axis, the y-axis, excuse me. It's a little bit up there. It's a higher score, and so forth and so on. So it just shows me my last one. Can we see the collectors and the sources on the screen? Nope, you actually see those back in Sumo Logic, back in the core product. So bear with me a second, I'll go back and I'll show you that since you asked. So this just shows me my latest insight. And then down here, this is my syslog. So you can see when somebody moves an insight from, say, new to in progress or whatever, we can see the activity that's going on. We resolve an insight. This is all put in the syslog here. So this is our syslog. Up here at the top, I can search by specific insights if I want to, by typing something in if I need to. Let me go back here to my heads up display. This is my home button to take me back here. These are my insights. So if I click on the triangle, I'll see all my insights. And there's 2 ways to see your insights. One, you can get a listing of your insights like we're seeing right here. This is my insight. This is my insight. And again, we're going to go into more detail. So just bear with me. Or I can also see where they are based on status. So I can see I've got so many new insights in progress, that sort of thing. I can take an insight if I want to, and I can move it from in progress to another category here if I want to. And you can set up these categories to reflect, different things. So for example, if you've got a SOC SWAT team, you can create a status here for SWAT team and drag objects into that. So these are, like I said, my new insights. These are ones that are in progress, and you can define these other categories in here as well. Okay. Can we leave a comment on an insight? Absolutely. So yeah, we're going to get into that. When we actually open up an insight, we'll see where we can put comments, put documentation in it. So absolutely. Yep. So I can see my insights. Additionally, here, I can also see my signals. So I can just actually look at my raw signals to see what's going on. I can also look, if I want to, by entity. So I can see which one of my entities maybe I want to keep an eye on and things along those lines. And then over here, I can also see my records. Now, it doesn't show me all the records because we literally get, thousands, but I can search for a specific record. The only time you really need to go and look at your records is when you first set up your collection process and your ingestion process to make sure the record came in and it was recognized by the system. You map things out properly and all that. So we typically teach that in the admin class. And then over here, I have a pull down menu where I can create rules, rule tuning, a bunch of different things. If you click on this menu, you're going to see rules, rule tuning, and custom insights. You won't see all these other options. So the point is that we can set up different roles and role-based security, just like we do in Sumo, that says what privileges and what permissions you have. I have full admin rights across this environment. You do not. Don't take it personally. So here's where I can create my rules, my rule tuning, and that sort of thing. Now, over here, here's my configuration. And the only time you really need to go into configuration is more of an administrative thing. So in my configuration, here's where I can define my log mappings. So when we bring in a new log source, we can define and say, okay, this is the IP field, this is that field, and so forth and so on. So you can control that. Also, here's where you create your actions, your different status codes, your different statuses, resolutions, all kinds of additional customization that you can do. Over here where the question mark is, you'll notice I've got a red glean up there right now. That red glean provides me, in this case, an announcement. Every time we update your rules, anytime we do something behind the scenes, we will update the announcements. And so you and I can go into the announcements and we can see what Sumo Logic has done for us, what updates, what things have been going on. Additionally, here's where I can also get into our product documentation. Here's where I can see about my system, API documentation, all that fun stuff. This grid icon takes me back to my core Sumo environment. And actually, I'm going to go back to my core Sumo environment here because somebody asked about my collections and my sources. So here, just like we talked about on Tuesday, is where I go into manage data, where I go into collection. And here is where we set up our sources for Cloud SIM. The only difference between the sources that are here and the sources that are set for Cloud SIM is that in the Cloud SIM sources, just give me a second, sorry, wrong click here. The sources for Cloud SIM have this checkbox enabled, so it forwards it on to the Cloud SIM environment. Okay, that's the only difference. And so you create your collectors and sources just like we do in the Sumo Logic core platform. And again, we talk about this in the Cloud SIM admin class. We also show you how to set collectors and sources in our regular admin class. We also do it in our metric master class, just so you know. But that's how we set up our collection. Let me check our questions here before we go back. So again, somebody asked the question, we see which sources have boxes checked. Good question, Stephen. I don't think so. Okay. So Taffy mentioned, I'm sorry. So sorry, Stephen, we can't see which ones per se are checked. It would be nice and make a nice enhancement now that I think about it, if we could put a glean in here or something that indicates that this is also going to Cloud SIM. So make a good enhancement. Somebody raised their hand. Feel free to ask your question. Okay, I see you got a question in here. Would it be possible to filter data events before sending them to Sumo Logic from my on-prem server? Yeah, and actually, let me back up. A lot of your questions are about the collection process and the source process. So let me help you out here a little bit. We've not really got into that in detail. When I create a source or you create a source, we have the ability in almost all of our sources here. We have the ability in almost all of our sources here to go down here, processing rules for logs, okay? And so we can go in here and we can create some processing rules. We can add a rule, give it a name, and we can write an expression to filter things out. So your question about, can I filter things out? Yes, you can do that here. And then the messages that match this filter, do you want to exclude them? Do you want to include them? Do you want to hash them? So good example is privacy data, right? Credit card data, in the United States, social security numbers, tax IDs, whatever. We want to filter those out. So we could write a rule that identifies our credit card information. And then if we want to, we can hash that information out or mask that information out so it doesn't show the actual numbers. So you can create those sort of filters for every source that you have. So I hope that answers that question. All right. And Brenda's put in the documentation for the processing rules. So if you want to look more information about that, you certainly can do that. You know, collecting data is a challenge for every environment. Again, this is a question. For large data transfers to cloud as bandwidth is limited. You're correct. However, one thing, keep in mind that our collectors will compress that data and encrypt that data and send that data. So we haven't, I mean, I understand your point is valid that we may have to set up our collectors differently to support the amount of data that we're getting. But as a rule of thumb, that is very easily done within our product. Okay. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to go back. Hopefully we got the collection questions answered. What I want to do is I want to go back here to my Cloud SIM environment. And I want to go over this last icon. This last icon, if I click on it, is who am I? Who am I logged in as? What browser time zone am I using? That sort of thing. And this is how I can sign out of the Cloud SIM environment if I need to. Yeah. Now, let's go back to my heads-up display. And to go back to my heads-up display, I click on the Sumo icon in the upper left-hand corner, and that takes me back to my heads-up display. So I've shown you a little bit of the overview. And by the way, in our lab guide here in lab 1, it has us go ahead and explore this and kind of break this stuff down. Okay. So that was lab 1 that we basically went through. Now in lab 2, I'm going to investigate an insight. And in this insight, I'm going to show you where the comments are, where you put your documentation, all of that fun stuff, as well as seeing the information from an insight. Okay. So to make this easy, I mean, I could sit there and click on these insights here, all right, which would select that one insight, or I can see all of my insights. So I'll click on this little triangle up here and I can see all of my insights. Now, I'm going to take this first little insight, insight 926, persistence with initial access. And so here with persistence with initial access, this is all centered around this one IP address, 192.168.38.102. By the way, when I put my cursor on this IP address, you notice there's this little icon here next to the IP address. And if I click on that, you'll see that I can actually do like a whois lookup, or I can look at, Google search on this IP address, or again, I can do various URL scans. I can do a whole bunch of things. And by the way, that can also be customized. So you can customize that additional functionality here that you want regarding an entity, the host name, the IP address, whatever. You'll notice here it says that this, I've got 4 signals here. The score overall is a medium score as opposed to a high, as opposed to a low. We'll get into that in a little bit. But basically what I want to do is I want to investigate this insight. So if I click on this insight, and I want you to click on this insight, we're going to walk through this insight together. So here on the left side, I see my insight. Here is my name of my insight. Where did this name come from? It came from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Okay. You'll see that there are certain actions here I can do, and these actions can also be customized. So I can send this to my ServiceNow ticket. I can now put it to Slack. I can now send it to my incident response teams. These can also be customized. I can notify folks through PagerDuty or Microsoft Teams. I could close the insight, and I don't want you to close the insight because we're going to look at this insight. But when I get it all resolved, I'm going to close it when I'm done. I have the ability to delete an insight. I don't believe you guys have got this enabled because we don't want you to accidentally delete an insight. Also here under the status, I can change its status from here. New, in progress, don't use, close. Again, we can update our statuses. We can customize that. So if you want to send it to the SOC SWAT team, you can create a status for SOC SWAT team and send it there. As I said before, here is my entity. Here is my severity score. It says here I have 4 unique signals. 4 unique signals, last seen over 7 hours ago. Here is the event time, how long it's occurred, the insight when it was created. These are tags associated with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is how we recognize this. And please remember, this is all being done automatically, okay? The system is doing that for you. You can add an additional tag if you want to. Here, ladies and gentlemen, is where you get to put your comments. So as I'm going through this, I can add a comment and put some documentation. All right, put my initials, investigated, looked into, whatever, and what resolutions we find, and so forth and so on. That's where we can put our documentation. Now, over here on the right, before I get into the right, let me just check the chats and make sure we're in good shape, okay? Okay, some questions going on that my wonderful SEs are taking care of. Good job, guys. Thank you. So over here on my signals, I have 4 signals, and this shows me my timeline. So again, from the start, first signal to the last signal, how long did it take? And over here, this purple icon, which indicates it's a threat intel. The first signal is over here. It happened first. And then my other 3 signals happened over here. I can, if I want to, go down here and see my 4 signals. My first signal was on the 18th at 10:15 p.m. Threat intel, device IP matched a threat intel file hash. What they're trying to say is we detected a bad file that we recognized to be a malicious file. We found it, and we were going to create a signal based on that. And we can see the host name, the device IP, the file name, all that stuff. I can go in here and look in more detail, which I will in just a second. But I can also see the next signal and the next signal and the next signal, because these signals together are going to tell us a story. And we want to understand what that story is. Additionally, I could also click on this insight here, or I could click on this icon right here on my timeline, and it will open up that first signal. So here I can see, again, a record flagged a file hash from a known threat intelligence match list. So we found there's a bad file in our environment somewhere. Here's the severity score of this. The severity score ranges from 0 to 10. Each signal has a severity score. Okay. And here's the event. Here's some rule, the rule that caught it. Also, whether it's based on threat intelligence. And I can scroll down here and I can see more information about this, the timestamp. Who found it? CrowdStrike found it. Gave us a list. Here's the file base name. And again, the AV systems recognize this as a known threat. found it on this device. Details. Here's where that log information really comes in handy. The file name, the file hash. Maybe they renamed the file. That's fine. The file hash is going to catch it. Okay. So they call it whatever they want to. Who's the user that found this, right? Again, the threat name. And by the way, I can click on this and it will take me to the threat name and give me information about it. Or I can click on this URL and it will tell me about this particular threat, give me information about it. I can see, like I said, my fields, what extracted fields I have in here, version, severity, again, my host, my domain, all kinds of nice stuff in here. Now, that's my first signal. To go to the next signal, I could either click back on signals and go to the next signal, or my personal favorite, remember I clicked on this, I can click on this double arrow here to the right. That takes me to my second signal. In my second signal, we have a proof point TAP, a user received an email with a phishing link. Anybody ever get an email with a phishing link before? Yeah, so the system detected this, right? The system detected this and said, hey, look, you got a user received a phishing link. And so again, we can see what kind of phishing link did they get. We can see the information about it. Who was the user? Keep in mind that all of these insights, these signals, are all centered around an entity. This activity, these signals are all happening with this one IP address. So again, I can see that we got the system detected that there was a file, bad file, malicious file. Then the user receives an email with a phishing link, right? And I can see information about that. There's the URL and all that stuff. Then I can see that the checkpoint system found this malicious file as well. And so they detected it. And here's the device IP that it came from. Then I can see CrowdStrike. Somebody must have clicked on this file and done something with it. Detection summary alert. Again, I can go in here and I can see what happened. I can see basically the activities and stuff like that that happened here. And so what do I need to do, right? From a SOC perspective, I probably want to go out and talk to the user that has this IP address. I want to talk to them. I want to scan their machine, take it offline, antivirus, scrub it, clean it. I want to remind people about phishing links, emails, things along those lines. These are the various actions that you would take and that you would document in your insight before you close this, resolved it, or whatever. So let me just check here on the comments to make sure we're all good to go. Okay. Okay. Severity, I'll get into. Okay. Just bear with me. Thanks for letting me know you can see the icon for deletion. Okay. Thanks very much. We'll take care of that. All right. So the severity score, since somebody asked the question, when we create a rule, whether we at Sumo create all these built-in rules, or you create a rule, you assign a severity score. And you just arbitrarily decide how significant it is. That value, as I said, could range from 0, which is totally insignificant, to 10, which is pretty darn significant. These signals, for these individual signals, so this one has a 5. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me go back to signals. This one has a 3. This one has a 4. 3 plus 4 is 7. Plus 3 again, that's 10. Plus 5 is 15. So 15 over a 2-week period of time, that's what flagged my insight. Anything 12 or greater in a 2-week period of time generates an insight. But the point is, when you create a rule, you decide what that score should be. And, I asked the question initially when I first saw the product is, okay, what's the documentation? What's the process on generating these scores? And I was told it's more of an art than a science. So you're going to arbitrarily pick a value based on how significant you think it is. For example, if I've got somebody changing ports on my firewall, that I would probably provide a higher score than, say, somebody logging in incorrectly or something, logging in from maybe 2 different locations. So something that has more threat, more vulnerability to my network is probably something I would apply a higher score to. But you're going to have to kind of swag scientifically, wild guess the scores. So, and again, some folks are putting some nice documentation here to provide some supplemental information on that. Any questions about the interface? I'm looking around.
Sorry, I just have a question. I got 2 questions. So when I said I can see the delete button because your colleague said you cannot delete insights.
Yep.
And that's why I said I can see a delete button. So
right, I appreciate that. Yeah.
What does that mean? And the other thing is on the severity. So, it always depends on the context. So where is that insight? Where is that vulnerability? Where is that attack happening? So basically, on the severity, can I say if it comes from that system, always give it a higher score? Like if it comes from that critical system, give it a higher score.
Yes. What you're going to do is you're going to create a custom rule for that system, and then you're going to give it a different weight.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, no, obviously things that affect things like my firewall or things that affect my domain controllers or my authentication servers are far more disconcerting than things that may affect my users or my printers or my, whatever. So yes, when you create that particular rule, you would then give that a specific score. Yeah. So good questions, folks. Appreciate it. And again, I appreciate you pointing out about this icon. Again, don't let me delete an insight because then we're going to have problems doing the class. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Back to my slides for a second. Somebody asked a question, is it possible to upload assets based on their criticality? I guess what I'm having a hard time with is, what do you mean by an asset? And what do you mean by uploading an asset? I mean, we can import rules if we want to, but I'm not sure that's what you mean by asset. So, and again, these logs, okay, devices, and import them with SIM. So again, what SIM does is it receives the logs from these devices, right? So we can get the logs, and that's part of our normal collection process. So you can create a specific collector for maybe your tablets and things like that, and take the logs from your tablets and bring those in. Or maybe you want to create a collector to go to your servers and grab the logs from your servers or your firewall devices or your various applications. So yes, you can, that's part of our normal log ingestion process. So hopefully that answers your question. The answer is yes. All right. So back to our slides for a second. Let us talk a little bit about our scenarios. So in this class, we have set up 3 different use cases, okay? 3 different use cases. One, we have a company, Financial Logic, which has big investors, and because they're based in Europe, they deal with GDPR, right? GDPR, of course, is that privacy and security of rules associated with the lovely European Union and what you can and can't do and what you can and can't have as far as, if somebody wants to beg out of holding their data, they can do that. And we all say, yes, that's great. That's wonderful. Give it a cheery aye. But that's Financial Logic. Sumo Pharma is worried about HIPAA and data privacy associated with health insurance with regards to stuff in the United States. And then the last company here is Sumo Coffee, which really their focus is on PCI compliance. Okay. The point is that in our exercise here in lab 2 and in lab 3, what you're going to find is that we've got lab 2A and we've got lab 2B. 2B is associated with Sumo Pharma. Lab 2A is the Financial Logic exercise. And then 2C is dealing with Sumo Coffee. And the same with lab 2A, 2B, I'm sorry, lab 3A, 3 and 3C. So the point is, what I'd like you to do, and by the way, I'm also going to mention to you here, since we wrote this course and we wrote these labs, lab 2B and lab 3B, those insights are missing. So you can't do 2B or 3B. But what I'd like us to do is we are going to do lab 2C. So I'm going to sit there and get into lab 2C here a little bit. And I'm going to show you an easy way to get around here. And I'm going to set you up. And then I want you guys to go ahead and look at it. And let's figure out what the heck is going on. So in lab 2C, which is on page 8 of your PDF, you'll see we're going to look for an insight called exfiltration with command and control. How can I find a specific insight? Well, one, we can go into insights. Two, in our filters here, we can filter based on a lot of things. I'm going to filter based on the name. By the way, there's 877 current insights in here. But I'm going to go ahead and click on name, and I'm going to choose the third option where it contains, and I'm going to start typing in the word exfiltration. And as I start typing it in, you'll notice that it automatically starts showing me options here. I've got exfiltration with command and control and exfiltration by itself. I believe for lab 2C, we wanted exfiltration with command and control. So when I click on that, now I'm seeing the 99 messages that deal with exfiltration and command and control. And these should all basically be the same insight. Okay, they're just occurring over different periods of time. So for this exercise, we're going to open up and click on, in this case, insight 685, the latest one. And so now you can see that this insight, again, the entity here is Rico Dynamite, a username Rico Dynamite. It has 5 unique signals. And what I want you to do is I'm going to give you 10 minutes here. I want you to look through these signals, and I want you to give me an idea of what's happened. Okay. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes here. I've got a little after, I'll put up a 10-minute timer so you guys can see, but I want you to go through these signals and I want you to see basically what's going on. So bear with me a second while I do that. And while I grab actually, let me make it 5 minutes. Make it a 5-minute exercise here. Hopefully I give you enough time. When this timer gets down to 0, we will regroup and we'll talk about this. Then we'll take a break, by the way.
Hey, John, just sorry to disturb you. Is there any chance you could just go back to that insight and tell me how you got it?
Sure, no problem. Yep. So if I go into my insights overall, which is this symbol right here, right? And then if I create a filter here, I can filter for what I'm looking for. I want to filter by name, and I want to use the word contains. Now, remember back to our directions here, lab 2C, we're looking for an insight named exfiltration with command and control. So if I start typing in here, exfiltration, you'll see that it shows me 2 hits. This exfiltration by itself and this exfiltration with command and control. When I click on this, it is now filtering all of my insights for basically what I'm looking at here.
Magic, thanks.
And then you can pick on an insight and then you're good to go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for asking. One thing I've learned is somebody's got a question, somebody probably has the same question. So thanks a lot. All right. I am going to, like I said, restart my timer here and I'll give you 5 minutes to look this thing over and we'll talk about it. So have fun.
And just to get some conversation going, for those who haven't dashed or rushed to go get a coffee, from what you've seen so far in terms of the insight generation, et cetera, I mean, is this stuff that you see as being valuable within your own organizations? I know, from from our point, that the whole insight generation is such a powerful tool that a lot of our customers come to us and say, you know what, this really has helped us. This definitely has helped us focus more on the important attacks and stop chasing a lot of false positives. So just to get, you know, a feel from the room from what you've seen so far. And don't all talk at once.
Going to say, yeah, I think, you know, with logging, the conversation quickly turns to like, so what, right? It's great having all this data, but if you can't dive in and get to the real important stuff quickly, it's, you know, then only really useful in forensics afterwards, right? If you've had an issue, you need to get ahead of it. So yeah, this is definitely interesting.
Oh, awesome. And also, I think something that's quite popular is, you know, that we find we have a lot of conversations around. It's the whole, you know, setting the window of when that insight is generated. Because, you know, like your attackers aren't going to just decide, they're not just going to give you one day in which they decide to attack your systems, right? These are things which happen over a span of time. And sometimes when you just, you know, just get one signal, you can just be focused on that one signal itself without seeing the context. Back to that question that you said, Dave, so what?
On that same vein, you know, typically if somebody's going to go out and try to steal credit card information or whatever, they've probably attacked you a couple days before, weeks before, trying to probe and test. So the point is that by being actively looking at your insights and seeing what's going on and using this tool, you can hopefully prevent those big attacks and take action and stuff as you need to. So as Taffy's sort of alluding to here, you know, we find it's got phenomenal value, but the proof is obviously in your court with your companies and seeing the value that it provides. So.
Just from, you know, perhaps just a show of hands, are they folks who are in this training session who are moving from other SIEMs and utilizing and moving to utilize the Sumo Cloud SIEM, or are most people just coming to do the certification just to gain, you know, an understanding? It would be great to see those who are actually, you know, by show of hands, any of you guys who are adopting the cloud SIEM. And if you are, you know, it would be interesting just for you just to share just a quick view of why you decided to use Sumo. That would be interesting to know as well.
Okay.
No, Rand, it was a pricing issue with Splunk.
You gotta love the Splunk pricing, right?
Okay, so back to this exercise. Hopefully we looked into the inside. Hopefully you looked into the inside here, exfiltration with command and control. You dug into these issues, these signals, and trying to get a sense for what's happening. So can somebody please tell me what this story is with regards to these signals and this insight? What's happening? What's happening? Well, I'll start here with, we got a guard duty alert, right? Somebody is trying to use my cloud internet account at manager access, trying to use my credentials here, trying to use credentials to log in to our IAM tool. All right, so that's the first hit that we got. That's the first signal. Then we also got an AWS API call where the threat intel matched an IP address, again, based on this user Rico Dynamite. And again, from this device IP address, they are trying to go after my AWS account. Then again, if I move on to the next signal, there are 5 signals here total. Then I see the API from a terminated Active Directory account. So somebody's trying to access an API call using a terminated account, suspicious to say the least. And then I can go in here and I see that guard duty reported some instance credential exfiltration. So somebody's trying to get credentialing information here. Guard duty is reporting on it. So this is all related to the same user, Rico Dynamite. Rico's been a bad person. And then finally, we see that we're getting some network firewall high severity issues in our AWS environment here as well. And again, we can see the source, we can see the destination, all that sort of thing. So again, we got malicious user agents here. We've got problems. So we, certainly probably want to change our account. We want to just, change the password on our AWS account. We want to find out a little more about this Rico Dynamite. And by the way, speaking of Rico Dynamite, this is going to get into our next lab. But you notice here, like I said, my entity name here, I got little Rico Dynamite. I can click on that. And here on Rico Dynamite, if I scroll down here a second, I can search for, I can do a Sumo log search on Rico Dynamite, and I can see everywhere in our logs where Rico Dynamite has appeared. Okay. Good. Thanks a lot. Okay. So this is the last 15 minutes. Let's make it a little bit broader, shall we? Let's go for the last 3 days. And so I can see everywhere where Rico Dynamite has been found in our logs. And so I can see it broader than just the Cloud SIM environment. Maybe I want to see what other systems they may have touched, where I may not have rules or alerts and things like that. So we can investigate this further. And that, just so you know, is what Lab 3 was designed to do, and particularly Lab 3C. So Lab 2A goes with Lab 3A, Lab 2B and Lab 3B go together, and Lab 3C and 2C and 3C go together. So here, like I said, we can look up and see what Rico Dynamite's been up to. We can also run some queries in Sumo Logic to see what kind of activity they've been doing. Again, using the power of the whole suite, right? Not just Cloud SIM, but everything, all the tools at your advantage. So that's Lab 2 and 3. And just wanted you guys to be aware of that. And what I propose we do now is, what do you say we take a break? So I propose that we take a 10-minute break, but before we do that, I want to see if there are any questions. Usually when you offer up a break, nobody has questions. I get it. See you back in about 10 minutes. I'm going to step away as well. So Talk to you in about 10 minutes. Great, thanks. Hey, folks, this is John. Hopefully you guys all had a chance to take a break and get some coffee or tea or juice or water or whatever. And hopefully we are back and ready to go. A couple things here. Let me just go ahead and enable a bunch of microphones. And Adam, I believe you had a question about the labs that you wanted to ask. So feel free. I'm sorry. Okay. So if we got questions about the lab, now is a good time. Also in the chat box, I see, I got you. Yeah, I'll take a look at that here in just a second. I'll look at that in a second here. Hang on a second. So Adam's question is how the system groups the signals into insights. Okay, so it groups it based on an entity. That entity could be a username, it could be a host name, it could be an IP address, some sort of who type thing, right? That's how it groups these into insights. And then, as we said, each signal has a score. And if the sum score of those signals over a 2-week period of time is greater than or equal to 12, it generates an insight. So Adam, I hope that answers your question. Okay. So Adam says, are these rules involved in default rules or custom rules? Both. The default rules that we provide, and keep in mind that we maintain those rules for you. So if they're part of our, they're rules that we update regularly, and we update the rules about every 2 weeks, unless there's an emergent situation. So for example, when log4j reared its ugly head, I think within 24 hours, we had updated a rule to catch that sort of stuff. Okay. So we typically do updates every 2 weeks or as more emergent things happen. So, like I said, and when you create your own rules, obviously that would also have an impact here as far as the insights. So Adam, I think we've got your questions answered. Steve, let me take care of yours. This is fairly easy. Can you get multiple insights from the same signal? Yes, you can. Absolutely. Absolutely. If the signals have 2 entities, yes, you can. Yep. So, because again, it breaks it down by entity. And if that signal is being generated for 2 or more entities, you would get 2 or more insights. So, yes. And then there's a question here about a query that's having a problem running. I'll take a look at that here in just a little bit. Now, also, while we were on break, I uploaded the recording from yesterday's class. So if you look in the chat box, you'll see there's a recording to the viewers. It's got a little passcode on it. That was yesterday's class recording, since we've had problems trying to get those recordings out to you guys. And then also, additionally, I took the slides for this class and I generated a PDF. So for those of you who want to take the certification exam, again, our certification exams are based a lot on the slides. So I took the liberty of generating the PDFs, and some folks are having a hard time downloading that from that slideshow area. I just decided to do it this way for right now. So and I posted that in the chat box as well. So hopefully that helps you out. Now, somebody asked me to look at a particular query. So let me go ahead and try to paste this query in. And the let me get rid of some of this. So here I have a query where I start with my index. And also I want to make sure I move this, backspace that. And let me just make sure it runs without too many errors. Okay, we've got a problem here with the count by. I see. This is supposed to change for whatever IP address I want to use. So let's make that a little string. Oh, okay. Well, let me try one other thing here real quick. There we go. It wasn't reading the quotes properly. When we typically take things from a document text editor type thing, sometimes those aren't straight quotes. Sometimes they're formatted quotes. So let me try this again. Good. Now the query is going to run. It's got no errors. And let me add some time to this so it can find this IP address in here. Now, what this query does, and this came out of one of the labs, probably 3C, is it looks for a specific IP address and where that IP address has been. So here I can see all the associated IP address. Here's the IP address, you know, which product did it come out of? What's the actual message here? So we can get a sense for where we're seeing this IP address. I can see this IP address. Here's time slice. I see it's been in CrowdStrike. I see it's proof point targeted attack profile. So that's, hopefully that answers the query and gets that taken care of. Again, you can change this IP address to an IP address that you want and all that fun stuff. So I hope that takes care of all the outstanding questions. And this brings us to the second part of our class. The good news is this is going to be a fairly easy part of our class. So we've investigated insights. We've done labs 2B and 2C. Now let's talk about customization. Let's talk about creating rules, rule tuning, insights, all of that cool stuff. So that's what we're going to do next, okay? The aggregated columns can be renamed. Yes, they can, certainly, yep. Just put an as clause in there when you do your count and you'll be fine, yep. So, customizing. We can create Cloud SIM rules. You can, I can, we can, if we have if you have permissions to do so. The Cloud SIM rule is logical code that deploys things based on information of the incoming records. When the rule matches, if the signal, I'm sorry, excuse me, if the record matches the rule, it creates a signal. So we're going to create a rule, and if the record matches the rule, it fires off and generates a signal, okay? So that's basically what's going to happen. And that signal, of course, like I said, this rule will have a score associated with it. Now, when we create rules, there are 4 types of rules. There is a match rule. A match rule is simply a Boolean condition, right? So a single login from an IP address, an IP that's on our banned list, right? So the IP matches a list of IPs, or it contains it. We also have threshold rules. So here I'm looking for a condition that happens within a particular period of time, or a number of a certain count of records. So here I want to say I've got failed 5 login attempts in under an hour. Chain rules. Chain rules are like threshold rules, except that we're going to basically bring them together. So we're going to combine threshold rules, if you will, to a chain rule. So here I've got 5 failed login attempts, followed by 1 success. So I'm looking for 2 different conditions there, but I'm combining them together. And then finally, an aggregation rule. Aggregation rules, again, typically deal with, again, a time frame and how many times something happens. So I want to see how many different IP address connections, how many failed logins, whatever, from a specific IP address in a specific period of time. But aggregation typically is something that, like we're aggregating, looking at the count of something, the sum of something. So these are the 4 different types of rules: match, threshold, chain, and aggregation. And yes, there'll be a test question or 2 on that, to be sure. Now, I'm going to show you match rule here in a little bit. So I'm going to walk you through a match rule. That's one of the labs that we've got coming up. We also have something in here besides match rules called, and let me just skip past this. I'll get into this in a second. Don't worry. Okay, this is not a big deal. We also have, and actually, I'm sorry, let me hit the slide because this is important. Best practices for custom rules. Check to see if the rules exist first. Check to that rule already exists. Use that rule because we're going to maintain it. Any custom rules you create, you've got to maintain. We don't maintain them. Obviously, we don't know about them, so they're up to you to maintain. Know your system well, right? So, for example, you probably wrote a rule because you noticed in your environment there are certain types of user things that happen. Your users are really good at clicking phishing emails, or your users forget to lock down their computers and log out at the end of the day, or whatever. So you write your rules for your environment. Also, understand your risk appetite and priorities, right? If you're a software company and people don't log out, that's a little different risk-wise than if you're a financial institution dealing with lots and lots of people's money, customers' money, and they don't log out. So that second scenario would have a much more riskier proposition. And then, of course, understand the 4 different rule types to use them. And most importantly, actually, I'm sorry, almost most importantly, make small changes and test. So when you set your score for your rule, throw in a value, pick a value. When you want to make adjustments to that, you don't really want to go high or low. For example, I said they range from 0 to 10. Okay. If you make it 5 arbitrarily, when you change it, make small changes. Make it a 6 or make it a 4. Go up or down 1, a test, and then go up or down 1 test. Don't try to change it by 3 or 4. It's just not going to help. And always, when you create a new rule, set it as a prototype. And what by marking it as a prototype, well, it won't generate any insights. So you mark it as a prototype, test its behavior. Then when you're happy with its behavior, you can clear the prototype check mark, and then it will generate insights for you. Otherwise, you may create a storm of insights, and you may not want to do that with a new rule. So, all right, looks like we're good here on the chat. Now, Adam, is there a question, sir?
Sorry, I want to ask for the prototype. After we define the prototype, can we do something like a simulation to simulate? But because we define prototype maybe based on a real case we happened in the past, so we want to check out if the rules really effective with that case to throw out expected signals. Can we do something like a simulation to replay those logs and against those new prototypes to see if it works fine?
Gotcha. Where do these records and stuff come from? They come from your logs. So you could either generate your own log and build, add it into your collections. Call this my threat log, my sample log, my test log, and in there have a bunch of cases that might cause that prototype rule to validate and create signals. So that's how you would do it if you didn't want to wait for the normal process. So normally you're expecting during the course of 24 hours, maybe this might fire off once or twice, but I don't want to wait 24 hours. So obviously you could create a pseudo log that has a bunch of these and bring it into your data and test to make sure this thing alerts.
Yes. Okay.
So, that answer your question, sir?
Yes, clearly. Thanks.
Cool. Now, besides creating rules, and again, there's 4 types of rules, we also have something called rule tuning. And rule tuning allows us to modify existing rules and apply our rule tuning to existing rules without having to rewrite them from scratch. So I can take a rule tuning and I can apply it to multiple rules. I can take, multiple rule tunings and apply it to various rules. Rule tunings are basically the exception to a specific rule for whatever reason. For example, I've got a rule that says, hey, look, if somebody's trying to play with a firewall, notify us. I don't want to turn off that rule. That's a valuable rule. I don't want people screwing with my firewall, pure and simple. But when John Meredith, who happens to be my firewall admin, is in there, I don't want that rule to fire. So you can create a rule tuning that says, if the user is John Meredith, who's logged into doing the firewall maintenance, don't fire off that rule. That's an exception. Okay. But otherwise, anybody else, yeah, fire off that rule. So rule tunings allow us to create exceptions. And because we're not writing rules, our rule tunes, when we apply them to the existing rules that Sumo or you guys may create, as those rules get updated and changed, the rule tuning is still in effect. So rule tuning allows you to create exceptions to rules. So far we've talked about rules that you can create, rule tuning that you can create, and then also a custom insight. You may want to automatically generate an insight based on something. Okay. You don't want to wait for the score of 12, greater than 12 over a 2-week period of time. Something comes in, I want an insight now. And Adam, this kind of goes back to your earlier question when you're testing and you're testing prototypes. Maybe I wanted to generate an insight so I could see it much quicker. And so you can also create custom insights. And so that's the third thing that we're going to talk about. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some labs on this. Now, again, the way an insight works is it looks at signals over the last 14 days. Each one of these signals has a score. So my green boxes here, if I add them up, 4 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2, if that's greater than 12 over a 2-week period of time, and it is, then yes, that would generate an insight. If I look at my red triangles here, 6 plus 5 plus 7, which is 18, again, greater than 12 over a 14-day period of time. My circles, 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 3, that is not greater than 12 over a 2-week period of time. Therefore, it will not generate an insight. So these generate an insight, these generate an insight, this one does not. It's all about the scoring. And again, the signals are what gets scored and they get added up into the insight. So I just want to make sure we're clear about that. So again, custom insights, I can base it on a rule or a chain of rules, a bunch of different rules if I want to. Again, I want to do faster alerting based on things. I don't need to create a custom rule per se. I just need to create a custom insight so that the insight fires off faster. So we're going to sit and play with these three things. Again, rule tuning are for exceptions, custom rules when you have a threat or data source unique to your system, or you want to change some of the rules that we already have, and then custom insights when you want to be alerted based on things. You want to generate an alert or a insight. All right. So if we go back to our document here and we go into lab 4, we're going to create a custom rule tuning expression. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go in here to our Cloud Sim environment. In our Cloud Sim environment, this icon right here is where you can do rule tuning, rules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to select rule tuning. And again, I've got a lot more options than you do based on my privileges. So click rule tuning. When I click here on rule tuning, I don't see any rule tunings because we haven't created any, okay? Rule tunings, like I said, are the exception. To create one over here in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to click create. Then we're going to give it a name. So up here, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to put my initials and I'm just going to call it rule tuning. I ask that you also call yours rule tuning so I can go and find these and delete these when we're done with class. So, because these could affect existing rules. And then the question is, this rule that I'm writing, that I gave it this name, do I want it to affect selected rules or do I want to affect all rules? Imagine you can shoot yourself in the foot here real careful if you're not careful. So selected rules is probably what I want. And then what rule do I want? So remember I said, if John Meredith is modifying the firewall, right? I don't want to fire off that rule about the firewall. So let me do a search here for firewall. There we go. So let's say we're talking about checkpoint firewalls. So I can select this checkpoint firewall, which this rule should be enabled and not disabled. And I can go in and modify a rule and make it enabled. But the point is that I want to create a rule tuning expression so that if this enabled firewall rule were to apply, I want to make an exception. So you'll find either I can include or I can exclude records that match this expression. So here's what's my expression. I type in here, for example, I'm going to start typing in here user. Maybe I grab user name, user email, user ID, whatever. I'm going to grab user email. And I can say something like equals. And I can start typing in quote. When I type in a double quote, it automatically gives me the ending double quote. Okay. Now, here is where Boolean logic is going to help or hinder us. Basically, I'm saying, look, I want to include records that match this. So if John Meredith logs in, yes, I'm going to fire this puppy off. I really don't want, I want this not to occur. So I'm going to put an exclamation mark in front of that so it says not equal. So now we'll fire off all the other emails other than John Meredith. Or I can change this to exclude and change this back to equals. So you've got to make sure you got the logic right. However you want to do the logic. And then I can click submit. And now I have a rule tuning exercise here. I can enable it. I can disable it if I want to. Furthermore, I can go in here to rule tuning and I can see if anybody created any rule tunings. This should take a minute or so, but this thing should update. And I should see my rule tuning as well as any of the ones that you guys are writing. There we go. So some folks have added some rule tunings. Great. And if I simply want to disable them, I can. If I want to delete them, I can. Pretty straightforward stuff. Okay. Yep. So Stephen asks, is it using an equal sign or a double equal sign for testing equality? We only use an equal sign or an exclamation mark equal sign for not equal to. So that's the syntax we use. One other little word of caution. Some of you may have chosen to take the code that's in the directions here and use that. And while that's all fine, well, and good, remember that this is done in a text editor. So if you decide, let me go back to my rule here for a second. By the way, if you want to edit your rule, you simply click on the link. And then if I go down here and I copy this information, many times it's not going to register the quotes properly because, again, of a text editor. So if I change this quote, then it fixes it and life is good. So just want you to be aware that you may have to change the quotes and stuff like that from smart quotes to regular text quotes. So that is that. And that is a rule tuning. Okay. Do the single and double quotes make a difference? Actually, it should have been single quotes. My fault. I got carried away. It should have been single quotes, but it really doesn't make a difference in this case. So single quotes, yep. Can you do it with a regular expression? No, you don't. Let me do this. Let me go into our documentation, help.simologic.com. And in our documentation, and the documentation for the Cloud Sim product is right here. So here in my Cloud Sim Enterprise, if I go into here and I look at my information here, in the rules and the syntax and all that stuff is in here. So how to write the rules before you're writing the rules, creating rules, the processing, the syntax, all of that stuff is here. So here's the rules syntax, same with expressions and all stuff. So here's the answer to your question about single quotes and double quotes. Various functions and stuff that you can use, all that. It is a little bit different than, like, for example, our regex or JSON or other expressions. Speaking of that, I can create, like I said, these rule tuning expressions. And I can also export them out as JSON and import them in here as JSON if I want to. Now, that's rule tuning. Rules, go up here, again, grab rules. Here it shows me all of our various existing rules. Most of these are enabled. Some of these can be disabled if you need them to be. Okay. But if you and I want to create a rule, again, up in the upper corner here, and by the way, I can import my rules here as well. By the way, I made a mistake just a second ago. I cannot import rule tuning. I can import rules. Sorry about that. So when I click create here, it asks us what kind of rule do we want to create? And in the lab, they want us to go ahead and create a simple match rule. Now we do match rules in this class. We do threshold and chain rules in the admin class, just so you know. But I'm going to grab a match rule. And again, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. So again, I'm going to put my initials in here and I'm going to call it match rule just for simplicity's sake. And I would ask, by the way, that you all name your rule match rule as well, so I can go in here and clean it out. And again, by default, this rule is going to be enabled. Fine. And basically, here's the logic that's going to trigger this rule. And then once it triggers and creates a signal, what are we going to call this? What name, what summary, all that stuff. Down here at the bottom, you notice I've got this golden triangle. And this golden triangle is going to let me not click the submit button until I get rid of these errors. So when I click on this golden triangle, I see that there are 4 issues here that I've got to get resolved. I need an entity name, a signal name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you build your rules, it's going to automatically try to help you here a little bit. So here in Lab 5, to create our custom rule, I am going to say device IP matches. And again, we're going to use these single quotes. So my rule, paste that in. Again, it doesn't like the single quotes as they come from our text editor. Let me replace them because my IP address should be in red. So if I'm using the local host, the loopback IP address 127.0.0.1, if this matches this rule, then over here on my entity, I get to specify what entity I am using. And in this case, I am using the device IP address. Notice when I populated my entity, one of my little golden things went away. What name do I want to call this signal? Suspicious IP address. What name? What summary would I like to put in there? So again, when I generate the signal, what would you like to see? And then I can also put in a description. So I can sit and put in the description. Houston, we have a problem, whatever. And then I get to decide what score it's going to be. As I said before, the score ranges from 0 to 10. So suspicious IP address of a loopback may be fairly low. I'm going to arbitrarily give it a number. And then it says here with tags. These are our MITRE ATT&CK framework tags. So I can look either by technique or tactic, and I can say this is dealing with discovery. Or I can add another tag here if I want to, and saying this is dealing with account discovery, IP discovery, whatever, account manipulation, whatever. So that's part of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And then if I scroll down and I see I got lots of questions here, here's where I mark this as a prototype. So you do want to mark them as a prototype. Everyone who has used this tool for years, who works at Sumo Logic, swears by this prototype. In fact, everyone who's been using this for years at Sumo Logic always, even though they're experts, always marks a rule as a prototype because you want to test it first. Otherwise, and what the prototype does is it will keep it from generating insights. So it will not generate false insights until you've had a chance to check it out. Once you clear this, then it will generate insights. All right, Taffy, thanks a lot. So, and so here is my new match rule. Again, there's my severity score. And I can also see if that rule is being used. So I can look at the rule and see if it's been triggered at any point in time over a period of time by opening up that rule and taking a peek. Just for fun here, let me go back to my rules. And let me grab one of these rules here by that exist. Web request to an IP address. I can open up that rule and I can see if it's been triggered off anywhere in here. Okay. So kind of handy. And as I said before, you can, I can, we can export this, duplicate it, we can import it, we can have ourselves a good old time. Okay. Okay, good question. So Stephen asks, will new rules triggered from historical logs? Okay. No, they're triggered as the logs are being ingested. So if something happened 2 weeks ago and that log event happened 2 weeks ago, and we create a new rule that's going to catch it, it won't go back. I need some event that goes into the logs now that's going to trigger it. So it's only, the rule should only be triggered when something matches that rule that's coming into our system. So it's not going to look at historical logs at all unless you re-ingest them, Stephen. So good question. But it's all based on what is happening in the system now, not what happened 2 weeks ago or 2 days. Okay. So good question. So again, when you create a rule, it's from this point forward is what it's going to check for and look for. And that's our match rule. Now, the last one in here is a custom insight. So again, I click on new custom insight, and there are no custom insights. And so I can, you can, we can create one. And again, we're going to give it a name. So once again, I'll type in my initials, custom insight, and I ask that you also give it a name of custom insight. And then it says when signals are created with the following signal name. So I can pick signals or I can pick a rule. So for example, here I want to grab a rule. Let me go back here and grab good old firewall rules here. And let me go ahead and grab this checkpoint firewall rule. So if this rule gets fired, it's automatically going to generate an insight. No score of 12 or not that. It's going to create a custom insight here right now. And that custom insight is going to be with my name, the name I gave my insight. I can put in whatever description I want to in here, give it a severity score. Remember that insights have either low, medium, or high as a severity score. And again, I can also add my MITRE ATT&CK tags and technique flags here. So you and I can add a custom insight. Okay. So that is adding rules, rule tuning, and custom insights. And those are the labs. Again, I remind you that you can log into the training environment if you want to, and run through this stuff on your own if you want to. So, what questions have you? And if you want to know what's next, hang on a second, let me get back in here. Okay, I thought we had a slide in here. Like I said, the continuation of this course is the Cloud SIM administration class that focuses on bringing your data in. It focuses on parsing out the right fields. That focuses on creating some more rules and things like that. But what questions have you before we give you an opportunity to take your certification exam? All right. Well, before I send you all on your way, let me turn my camera on for a quick second. And let me say again, it's been my pleasure to be with you guys over the last 3 days. If there's anything we can do to help you, I will put my email address and contact information in the chat box one more time. But anything we can do to help you, like I said, feel free to reach out, let us know. Again, I thank you for taking the time for the last 3 days, learning this material. And again, if you want to stick around and take the exam, I think you guys have all know how to go in and log, but I'll walk you through it one more time. But again, just want to say thanks. I am looking forward to the day when we get to do these things face to face. So I am looking forward to all of us getting together in a room some point in time and, talking about some of the stuff face to face and networking and all that fun stuff. So thanks a lot. And I am going to stop the video. I'm going to stop the recording